Hey everyone, welcome to a new video. This one is around crypto wallets. So I typically get questions from friends or people who are new to crypto around like, what are wallets, how do they work? And given it's a bit of a complicated topic, I thought why not create a video for it so I can link them this video. So let's get started. So before we try and figure out what a crypto wallet is, let's figure out like how they're actually different to bank accounts, or even simpler, like how do banks work? So we have you, and then we've got the big bank here, bank, because why not? So, and then you have, let's say, your employer, let's say job, and what basically happens is you get money from your job that goes to the bank, and then the bank gives you your money, or lets you at least access it. It's not actually yours though, it's the bank's. If the bank wants to freeze your accounts, or they want to basically impose limits on how much money you can take out at a certain time, at the end of the day, it's the bank's money, but of course, it's under your name. So the key thing which I want to emphasize here is that the responsibility of keeping the money safe ultimately lies with the bank, and that's why they're highly regulated. And that's kind of the way that they are. Sorry, that's the reason that they are the way that they are. Now, how this is different in, I guess, a crypto world is effectively there is no bank. You basically have the blockchain, which is a series of connected computers and networks that keep track of the ledger. And I've got a previous video that explains how like crypto and blockchains work in more depth, but for this example, basically it's a network where everyone keeps track of everyone's balances. That's why they call it a shared ledger. So in this model, what happens is it's not like you go to someone else who then manages your money on the network. You basically manage your money directly on the network, and that's kind of what makes crypto custody, custody being who actually controls and holds the money, a bit more complicated. So in terms of what a wallet is, this is kind of like a nice segue. A wallet is basically, think of it as an authorization code of some sorts, right? So this authorization code is what tells these computers that run this network that this is indeed, in fact, you who's authorizing this transaction. Now, this authorization code has two components to it. One is the private key, and the second is the public key. So, as the name's in public is what everyone knows, and private is what you should only know. And the public key is derived from the private key. Now, the way that these two keys work are essentially, you'll have your public key that says, let's say it's 0x A, B, C, D, E, F, something weird and long like that. And what you do when you want to spend or use your money or receive money, when you want to receive money, you basically tell someone, hey, here's my address, send it here. But when you want to spend money, basically use your private key, which is in effect a very large number, but let's just say it's 1, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's not this short, it's very, very large, and it's a prime number. So with this private key, what you basically do is you say, I want to send $10, and you basically digitally sign this message with this private key, and then it gives you some weird long string of text. And now we can basically see that, let's say, long text here. So let's just put this in a box. And then what you can do is you can say, me, Xerix ABCDEF, wants to spend $10, and here's the proof that I've signed with my private key. Now, the important thing to know is your private key is never exposed, and this is kind of the magic of encryption. You can basically, people can verify the fact that this long text did in fact come from this key, but they're never going to know what your private key is. Because remember, once someone knows your private key, they can act as you on the network. So that's why you want to keep it private. But now we've got these 3 pieces of information. I, Xerox, A, B, C, D, E, F, want to send this much money, and here's proof that it is me who's actually signed this message, and I want to authorize this transaction. And then you basically have a transaction and gets submitted to the network, and then you can basically use the blockchain. That's really all it really comes down to. Now, you're like, okay, that sounds good, but there are all these different types of wallets that are out there. So let's basically talk about that. So in essence, there's, I would say, more or less 3 kinds of wallets. Of wallets. So the first is what we call non-custodial cold wallets. And trust me, I'll explain what all these terms mean, and it'll be nice and simple. The second is non-custodial hot wallets. And the third one is custodial wallets. And these are always hot. And we'll explain what literally all these big terms mean in a second. So, non-custodial cold wallets. So first of all, custodial. Maybe you might know what it means, but it basically means that whether you fully own, you're in full control of your money. No, that is not right. Non-custodial is no one else is in charge of your money for you. It's in your custody. I'm not really sure how to explain it more than that. But the key point to emphasize here is cold. So because all your money basically relies on this authorization code, there's basically 2 ways you can store this authorization code. A, like physically on a piece of paper, which isn't connected to the internet. So when you want to think cold equals not connected to the internet in a direct way, in essence. And then the other way, actually let me change the color here. Second type is hot wallets, effectively. And these are connected to the internet, and they're very accessible. So when we have hot wallets, it means that it lives on your computer somewhere, and that means it's really easy to use because you don't have to have a separate device or anything. It's connected to the internet, and it works really well. But the downside is it's a lot easier to be hacked effectively because that authorization code or that private key lives in some system that is corruptible in some way. Whereas cold storage means that it's not connected, or it's in a very secure device that isn't connected to the internet, but it's basically less convenient. So you basically need this less convenient but more secure. This is in essence more convenient but less secure. So the way you think about hot wallets and cold, like I will keep hot wallets, but I'll keep small amounts of money on them just in case I want to play around with things or I want to send someone money. That's where like you use hot wallets. But cold wallets, or if I'm storing, say, my rule of thumb is typically if you're handling anywhere more than $10,000, you want to basically invest in a cold, non-custodial cold storage wallet. And to give you an example of the type of cold wallets you have, the most popular one is basically when you buy a hardware wallet. So a hardware wallet is essentially a little key, like a Trezor or a Ledger. There's a little screen on it and has 2 buttons. And essentially your private key or your authorization code lives inside this device, or it's basically stored in it, but this device is very secure. And what you do is you then plug this into your computer over here, and whenever you want to authorize a transaction, it makes a request to this device, which is really secure, and says, hey, I want to spend $10. Do you authorize this transaction? And you hit yes, and then it does the signing inside the device, and then gives back these, basically just this piece of information to the computer, and then the computer can broadcast it to the blockchain, or essentially the network. So that's basically how cold storage works. Now, the key thing with cold storage is that this authorization code, this private key, it's commonly known, and this is where we get into more nuance. I'm going to introduce a new term for a second. It's called a seed phrase. And you'll see this a lot. So seed phrase is, think of it as like the most important private key, or the private key that rules them all effectively. So seed phrase is typically 12 to 24 words, and the words are kind of like bat, dog, bottle, curve. It'll be super random words. And you always see like some crypto app which will say like, make sure you don't tell anyone your seed phrase or something like that. And the reason is that these 12 or whatever words basically can then generate multiple private keys for you. And of course the relevant public key. So this is the phrase that rules them all. So when you set up your hardware wallet, you write these like 12 or 24 words down on a piece of paper, and you make sure this piece of paper never has a photo of it taken. It can never exist digitally, because as soon as it exists digitally, it means you've basically converted your cold wallet into a hot wallet, because that seed phrase or that authorization code now is living in a place that's connected to the internet, and that's absolutely terrible. So you write this on a piece of paper, and then you basically have your hardware wallet. Basically, you put the seed phrase into the hardware wallet. There's a way to enter into the software in a secure way. And once that exists in the hardware wallet, basically you can now use your hardware wallet to sign messages. But in the case that you lose this device, you can basically buy a new device and then basically put your seed phrase into that device, and now you can re-sign transactions again, and you're good to go. This is like the most secure setup. Well, there's even more secure setups, but this is good for like majority of people. And it's typically what I recommend people to learn earlier rather than later, because as you get deeper down the crypto rabbit hole, you get more money, and you put in more money, and you start running into more risk if you haven't done this setup correctly. The second was non-custodial hot wallets. So this is typically what MetaMask is, that orange fox that you guys might have seen. So it works in the same way. You have a seed phrase, and it generates you a bunch of wallets which exist on your computer, but there is no hardware wallet here. Your seed phrase exists in your computer itself, which is really handy and convenient because you don't need to buy like a new device and whatnot. But it just means if you ever get a virus or someone else gets control of your computer, there's probably a way that they can extract the seed phrase from your computer and then sign transactions as you on the network. So it's good for like having play around, but I wouldn't recommend it for too much. Now, there is a distinction to make. MetaMask, which is the orange fox, and you'll see everywhere when I'm trying to draw a fox. This is a terrible fox. Anyway, MetaMask, which is an application, it's a weird one. It's a browser wallet, but it lets you use your hardware wallet to plug in as well. So when you think MetaMask, don't think hot wallet storage. It's just MetaMask gives you the option to use cold and hot wallets. So MetaMask, when you set it up, will create a hot wallet for you by default, but you can also set up a cold wallet where it will let you use your hardware wallet through it without storing the seed phrase. So that's like a little bit of a nuance to know, and basically every crypto app that you use will basically say connect with MetaMask. So MetaMask is your entry point, but I don't want you to think MetaMask equals insecure. It's just a hot wallet on MetaMask is insecure. Ideally, you want to connect your hardware wallet via MetaMask. And at no point should you ever be putting your seed phrase, your original seed phrase from your hardware wallet into MetaMask. MetaMask will give you a new seed phrase when you set it up. And you still write that down on paper and take care of it in case you lose access to your computer. But you always think at the back of your head, I could lose all the money that's in my MetaMask hot wallet effectively. And that's really a hot and cold wallet. Now there's the third option, and this is kind of where we get to a lot of present day crypto. So you're probably thinking, man, like this is a lot of work. I have to memorize this key and that key, and like fuck, like why can't I just use a simple email and password and basically how the existing internet works? And that's a great point. That's what a lot of people did do. So with the exchange FTX, or even this is basically for any exchange that you see that makes it easy to buy crypto, they're basically custodial wallets. And what that means is they hold your crypto on behalf. So they do all this crazy private key management stuff for you. But the downside is they actually own your crypto. And because they're not regulated banks, it means you're basically not protected with government guarantees. And this is basically where the whole FTX debacle happened, where because FTX owned user funds, I say, hey, don't worry about the private key stuff. You can just use your user normal email and password. We'll handle it all for you. They basically use those funds in illegal ways. And that's kind of where there's been a lot of debacle with crypto, where it's like a lot of the time these big hacks happen because people can't be bothered learning all of this stuff. So they take the easy way out and say, how do I just use a custodial wallet? And that's kind of like the problem. And custodial wallets are very similar to how the bank works, where, so going back to our original diagram, rather than you accessing the network, you have an exchange here. And the exchange says, hey, deal with us and we'll deal with the network. And once again, you create an intermediary, which if you looks very similar to how a bank works, except these things aren't as good as banks, because banks actually give you guarantees and there's regulation around what they can and can't do with your money. So a crypto exchange is kind of the worst of both worlds. Now, when I say exchange, it keeps getting more complicated. You've got centralized exchange, known as CEX, and then you have decentralized exchanges, which are DEXs. When I'm talking about exchange, I mean centralized exchange. A decentralized exchange is an exchange which doesn't hold on to your money. And that's a whole nother video. If you're interested in it, I can let you know more about it. But essentially what I'm talking about here is centralized exchanges. So that's your Coinbase, your FTX, your Kraken, or whatever else you use in your country. So that's kind of like at a high level, your three wallets. So non-custodial is essentially you having full ownership of your money and wallet. Sorry, 1 second. I got tripped up. I'm like, wait, have I been explaining it the other way around? Yes, no, okay, I'm correct. So a non-custodial wallet is one in which you hold your funds, and if it's a cold wallet, then the way you're accessing your money is in a way that isn't, connected to the internet. A non-custodial hot wallet is one in which you are accessing your money, but that private key is held in some sort of like internet connected device. Then a custodial wallet is basically someone else is holding your money on your behalf and you trust that they're doing this whole key management correctly. But often they don't. So I wouldn't trust them, or I wouldn't bank on that as being your long-term strategy. Of course, there are like some very secure custodial providers, but then they cost a lot of money and are typically used for hedge funds or investors that are managing to the tune of tens of millions of dollars. There's also a fourth type of wallet that are smart contract wallets. But honestly, that just gets a whole new level of confusing. I think I've made a video on how smart contract wallets work, so you can always go check that out. Cool. Now, the last bit, the dangers slash risks of wallets. Now, it really depends on the type of wallet you're using. If you're using a non-custodial wallet in any way, shape, or form, The biggest risk you have is when you sign the wrong transaction. So you're saying, hey, I want to send $10 to Bob, but in reality, you're sending it to Alice instead. And that just makes sure you have to be careful around the message that you're signing. So that's kind of like the biggest risk there. And of course, making sure you don't lose your seed phrase. The risk with the hot wallet is same thing. You can still sign the wrong thing, but you can also basically lose all your money if someone get access to your seed phrase. Now, one really popular scam that happens is people will call you up or send you an email saying, hey, I'm customer support for this company. I really need you to tell me your seed phrase. You never, ever, ever want to tell anyone your seed phrase. It's basically saying, here is my money. So that's the risk here. Now, the risk with custodial wallets is the custodian gets hacked and you lose all your money. Or the custodian abuses their power and uses their funds in not so great ways. So yeah, that's kind of the risks. But of course, this isn't a very comprehensive video, but what I want to explain to you is the concepts that all of this relies on. Now, when you read articles online, a lot of them should make more sense, and you're not going to be trying to understand like what's a private key, what's a public key, what does custodian mean, what is cold wallet, what's a hot wallet. These are the key terms you need to know. Everything else is pretty easy to figure out if you can understand this video really well. That's about it. If you have any other requests, let me know. And yeah, stay safe out there, guys. Bye.